Good morning and welcome back to Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Adsit, and feeling pretty good right now. Brewers ended up with the series victory in the final game last night. They ended up winning this game 7-1 and finished the homestand 3-3. So all told, maybe some things with the umpire calls that we wish could have gone our way, maybe could have changed this, and realistically maybe could have only lost one game in this entire homestand. But nonetheless, Brewers at least even it out, make a little bit of light of what we've gone through in the last couple games, specifically the last few, I should say, actually. Just kind of making light out of a poor situation with some of the umping and some of the calls that we saw. And the Brewers remain 500 at home so far this season, so still not playing the greatest of baseball at home, which obviously we would like to change. We'd like to see a little bit more offensively and more consistent basis at home here. But overall, I mean, you're sitting at 500 still relatively early in the season. Haven't had too much of a taste of consistent home games yet to this point. We've been playing a lot of games on the road, and the road record is currently making up for any downfall we have at home right now. It's currently sitting at 12-4 on the road, hoping to continue that trend here as we move into the Chicago series, which is obviously going to be a big one here. Cubs ended up picking up the victory last night in a 1-0 victory over the Mets. Little bit of a controversial call there to end that game, but after I was able to watch the replay and see several angles, I actually do think the umpires got the call correct in that game. So Cubs win that one 1-0. They remain half a game behind the Brewers. And depending on what happens there in today's game, we will see if the Cubs and Brewers on Friday's matchup will be tied in the NL Central, or if the Brewers will have a whole game lead there. We'll kind of see based on what happens in today's game later this afternoon. So before we kind of dive into some of the game recap from last night's game, I actually wanted to talk about kind of the suspensions that was handed out there yesterday morning after the MLB was able to get a chance to review kind of what happened, and they ended up handing out some suspensions, which, looking up and down the suspension list of what took place after this one, there really is only one suspension that makes sense to me, which, from my standpoint, is actually really frustrating and just kind of puts a question mark on what determination did these umpires make to hand out these suspensions. So, to give a quick rundown and background of what happened, we see Abner Uribe, he gets a 6-game suspension. Now, this one specifically, I personally understand. I think 6 games is fair. I was actually having some conversations with some other people, and they were asking what I thought on what suspension he was going to be handed out. And I said, honestly, less than 5 games would surprise me. He was kind of one of the main instigators in this case. He threw the first swing at Jose Siri, so it's like, I do completely understand that. I think 6 games is a fair suspension. Now, Uribe did appeal this, which is basically a player's way of trying to get it reduced. And I do not believe that went through. So he's still sitting at 6 games, but because of the appeal, it actually pushes back your suspension, which is why we were able to see him pitch in yesterday's game in the final game of the series. So this one I can understand. Like I said, I think Abner Uribe, I don't mind the fact that he was trying to show up for his teammates, kind of defend them, especially with Freddie Peralta there. But I do understand the suspension. I think a 6-game suspension is a fair suspension in this case. I think that it's reasonable within what the MLB decided here for this suspension. Now, moving into some of the other ones, this is where I'm going to get a little bit confused and a little bit irritated as to why I don't fully understand this. So, first on the Rays side, Jose Siri, who was the other part of this big altercation that happened, he only gets a 3-game suspension, and he had it appealed yesterday and actually had it reduced to 2 games. So, what I don't fully understand is I don't know, I've tried to watch the video back several times, and I've tried to kind of take into account all the different aspects of what I think went down. Obviously, Abner Uribe kind of brushes up against him on his way back to first base, so that kind of instigated some of the contact, I guess. But there was no words exchanged by Abner Uribe at all in this entire thing, at least in the onset. There was a little bit of a stare down, maybe kind of trying to show him up a little bit after what happened with Freddie Peralta and Jose Siri disrespecting Peralta a little bit with that home run. But besides that, I mean, Jose Siri was the one that initiated any conversation that was happening. He was throwing out some words. Now, what I don't know is if the MLB was able to recover exactly what was said. I hope that they were able to see what was said, because Abner Uribe and Jose Siri's post-game conference on what words were exchanged was a little bit different. There was a little bit of controversy even within that. Jose Siri basically just said that he asked why Uribe brushed up against him, but Uribe completely disagreed with that. He basically said there were words that were said that should not be placed on a baseball field or had no place to be said in that game. So, I don't know exactly what was said. I hope that the MLB was able to uncover the audio in this one. And secondly, even if they weren't, there was the first base umpire in this case that was basically tried to get in the middle of that conversation. So you would think that he would be able to relay the information of what was said. Now, granted, based on how the umping in this series has gone, with some of the decisions they've made, I don't know how much I trust them to relay the correct information one way or the other. But nonetheless, I just don't fully understand the 3-game suspension for Siri. I think, and now being reduced down to 2 games, I just don't fully understand it. I think, he obviously words were exchanged. He was definitely an instigator in this case. And nonetheless, he also landed at least 1 punch, if not 2, to Abner Uribe. And granted, they weren't like headshots to any means. And honestly, both of these guys probably should learn in ways in which to fight. I mean, I'm glad it would have been a longer suspension. I'm imagining if Abner Uribe would have landed a punch, which he actually did, I think, land a punch to Sal Frelick of the Brewers. Kind of just some incidental contact there. Looked like it clipped Sal Frelick actually pretty good looking back at the replay. So hopefully he's okay and there's no injury there. But, I just don't understand. Jose Siri did for sure land 1 punch kind of to the neck area of Abner Uribe. So I just don't understand where the MLB is coming up with this number of Abner Uribe gets 6 games and Jose Siri gets 3 games. If this is the MLB's way of trying to claim that Abner Uribe was the instigator in this case, I disagree. I think, yes, did he have something to do with it? Absolutely. Do I think both of them were very, they initiated this controversy? Of course I do. I mean, these were the only 2 guys on the onset that were a part of this, obviously based on some frustration and boil over from earlier in the game. I just don't understand how you can't basically give these guys the same suspension. I think Jose Siri is just as responsible for the altercation that took place as Abner Uribe is, but then again, this is kind of seems like all these calls and all these determinations made by the umping and the MLB crew seems to all be going against the Brewers right now, and it's definitely frustrating, but I guess we are where we are with that, and Abner's going to have to serve his 6-game suspension at some point. I don't know exactly when they're able to, based on the appeal, I think they're able to push that back a few games. So it'll be interesting to see where that puts him in that standpoint. Now, moving on to some of the other, so there was 2 more suspensions on the Brewers side in this one, both of which I was a little bit confused and frustrated about. So Freddie Peralta receives a 5-game suspension. Pat Murphy receives a 2-game suspension. Basically, Pat Murphy, from my understanding, is suspended due to being the lead role and manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. So basically kind of having to take some responsibility to what happened. So I guess I can kind of understand it from that point. Back-to-back ejections maybe had something to do with that. Maybe some words that were exchanged exactly. Maybe that played part of a role in that. I'm not exactly sure. That one, I guess, does make a little bit of sense to me the more that I think about it. I do think that it's reasonable to have, I guess, based on what's taken place. I guess it does make sense to maybe have the manager suspended in this case for a couple games. So he served his first game of the suspension yesterday in the series finale against the Rays, and then that'll carry into Friday's series opener against the Cubs. So right now we have Ricky Weeks filling in. He's the interim manager for the Milwaukee Brewers. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Ricky Weeks filling in. He's had some great experience on the field as a Milwaukee Brewer his entire career. And he collected the first win under him as the manager in yesterday's game. So congrats to him on that. And I think he's just as fit to be a manager, honestly, in this league as several other people. So not too much to go about there. But yeah, so we see Pat Murphy with the 2-game suspension. Now, back to Freddie Peralta. This is the one that really irks me personally. I just don't understand how the 5-game suspension comes out of this. So from my understanding, the 5-game suspension is due to the MLB deeming that Freddie Peralta intentionally hit Jose Siri. Now, there's a couple things that I want to cover on this. First of all, when Freddie Peralta hits Jose Siri in this one, it's still, a relatively close game. It's not like the Brewers are blowing the Tampa Bay Rays out of the water at this point. So why Freddie Peralta would find it necessary to, throw at a guy, I don't fully understand. And secondly, if, for any Brewers fans that have listened to Freddie Peralta's, conversations with Willie Adames or some of the other guys that he's great friends with, Freddie Peralta seems to be just a great guy. He does not seem to have the mentality of wanting to instigate any controversy or get in any fights or anything like that. He just seems like the nicest guy. He's always a very upbeat type person. He's got a great personality, and he's a very competitive, he's got the competitive instinct that we've always seen in him. And I just don't fully believe in this case that Freddie Peralta was intentionally trying to hit Siri in this case. And second to why I think that this is the case is because typically, in years past when you've seen guys get thrown at, usually they go for the back, neck, or head area. That just seems to typically be the area of when you're trying to throw at a guy. This seems to be the intentional area of where you're trying to throw. Obviously, the neck and head area is, a very gray area as to, why somebody would want to throw there. I think it's very dangerous to have a ball thrown at your neck and head area, no matter whether you're wearing a helmet or not, whatever it may be. But typically you see in today's game where, there's some frustration that boiled over, you're trying to throw at a guy, typically you're going to throw middle to upper back area is typically what we see. So the fact that Freddie Peralta hits Jose Siri in the mid to upper leg, and even behind him, Jose Siri actually, when he was trying to get out of the way of this ball, even you could argue kind of caused more of a square hit than what it would have been, kind of trying to move out of the way, and he actually caused himself more direct contact with the ball. So I just don't understand exactly. This kind of goes back to Chris Guccione being the one guy in this entire altercation in the stadium that, for whatever reason, I don't understand why he gets to decide that he's the only person in this entire stadium that deems that Freddie Peralta intentionally hit Jose Siri. And nonetheless, even if he did, I don't understand how you don't at least give warnings first, unless there was something that went on beforehand, before game, which they said, you hit this guy, you hit anybody in this, we're just not going to have it. But obviously in this game, there was no reason for that going into the game. So I just don't understand why Chris Guccione can be the one guy in the whole stadium as the crew chief of the umpiring staff to determine that Freddie Peralta intentionally hit him. So I think this is just Chris Guccione's way of I guess I really don't know what he was trying to prove. If he was trying to prove himself from some standpoint, I just completely disagree with the call. I honestly don't really respect him very much as an umpire anymore. I know he's had a little bit of a poor reputation, and just with the calls that were made all series long, and the fact that he was screaming back at Pat Murphy kind of shows that he's not one of those umps that's just willing to take it And a lot of these times the umps, I think good umps, what kind of separates the umps is you see them step away, take a little bit of a breath, let the head coach kind of get out whatever it is they want to get out with anger or anything like this. But in this case, you see Chris Guccione just giving it right back to Pat Murphy for whatever reason. I don't know if there was something underlying maybe in his life or something that he wanted to get out. I guess I really don't know, if there was something, more words exchanged before game from the, Friday's game between Pat Murphy and Chris Guccione that carried into this one. But again, if that was the case, that's on the umpire not coming into the game with a clean slate. You have to try and kind of mitigate and erase what happened in the game prior, I think, is what you have to do. And in this case, that's not what we saw. I think there was a little bit of boil over, and I just don't understand. So, like I said, I don't know if one thing I would be interested to know is I don't know, and this is something that if anybody else knows, please let me know, if the crew chief of that game really has anything to do with the suspensions, or if it's more of like an MLB kind of going to, going through themselves, like some of the upper inner MLB personnel. I don't know if that's kind of their discretion, kind of going through the film and looking at that and making their determination that way. I just don't, I just don't understand how Chris Guccione thinks that he's such an almighty umpire that he deems the ejections. And the other fact that really irritated me in this one, and I know I mentioned this in the last one, is how come through all this that has happened, knowing that you have the microphone, you have the reason to give any information and what happened to the audience, why are you not going on the microphone and, informing the Brewers fan base and anybody that was in that stadium and the viewers for both the Rays and the Brewers on either side? Why are you not telling the audience as to what happened? I mean, this is one of these scenarios. You're literally just having the viewer sit there, wondering what happened, wondering what was said, and a lot of the information is coming post-game now from either an apologetic way from the MLB or trying to say, hey, we actually got the call right this time. It's just like, come on, guys, we have to be better. The umpiring situation in the MLB is really starting to irk me, and it just needs to be better. The MLB, I think, has had a better reputation with their umpires than like the NFL and the NBA specifically in the past couple years. But I feel like we're starting to slide into that fact where the umpires are starting to make such poor judgment calls and just blatantly bad calls that I just don't understand how you can make some of these calls. But so yeah, I'm really frustrated. I don't think the 5-game suspension for Freddie Peralta is acceptable. I don't think it's proper. I think it's way overblown than what it should be. And in a comparison, I wanted to bring this in back to when Rhys Hoskins in that first series of the year against the Mets was thrown at. So Yohan Ramirez, he throws a ball behind Rhys Hoskins in this game, second game of the year, throws it a good 2 foot behind him, but he was aiming for that upper neck area. You can see when the ball is released that the ball is coming for that upper back and upper, neck head area, which is typically where we see pitchers throw at batters when there's some kind of altercation or you're purposely, intentionally trying to hit the batter, which in this case was 100% obvious, which was the case of what was happening, considering Rhys Hoskins slid in a little bit hard at second base into Jeff McNeil, a little bit of an altercation there, and anyway, rest is history with that. But what I wanted to dig into is, so how can the MLB determine, so Ramirez gets suspended 3 games for this one, and head coach Carlos Mendoza suspended for 1 game. What I want to understand is how can you say Freddie Peralta gets a 5-game suspension when Yohan Ramirez clearly, and it was blatantly clear that Yohan Ramirez was intentionally throwing at Rhys Hoskins. Now, I understand that he didn't hit Rhys Hoskins. I don't even think it was intentional that he threw a foot behind him. I think it was just a poor pitch, and I think he just completely missed his spot. And that was part of what some of the Brewers players were saying after the game, is it's like, if you're trying to hit them, just hit them. Don't throw behind their back. If you're going to hit them, just hit them. And I don't know if it was just a completely missed spot what happened with that, but I just don't understand how you can clearly see, clear as day, that Yohan Ramirez was throwing at Rhys Hoskins in this instance, and he only receives a 3-game suspension, but Freddie Peralta on kind of a, in my opinion, it just wasn't very clear to me that Freddie Peralta was trying to intentionally hit Jose Siri. Was he maybe intentionally trying to? Yes. Am I completely ruling that out as a possibility? Absolutely not. I'm in no place to say that he was for sure not trying to hit Jose Siri. I don't think he was, but that's besides the point in this case. I just don't understand, and even in the coach's standpoint, regardless of whether Rhys Hoskins was actually hit, the intention was 100% there to cause harm to the batter and hit Rhys Hoskins in this case. Yet both the manager for the Mets and the pitcher at that time get lesser suspensions than Pat Murphy and Freddie Peralta. I mean, come on. It just seems ridiculous. It still seems like the MLB and the umpiring staff is almost out to get the Brewers right now. I don't know what exactly is going on. It's just very frustrating from this standpoint to see these suspensions. I think Freddie Peralta did appeal his. I'm assuming it won't get reduced just based on, I feel like, I was even surprised to see Jose Siri's appeal reduced. I think it's very rare for players to get these suspensions reduced based on an appeal, but we will see exactly what comes of that. I do think because of the appeal, it does push back his suspension a little bit. Right now, he actually replaced Bryce Wilson's spot for Sunday's start against the Chicago Cubs, so that would be really nice to be able to see him at least pitch one game against the Cubs, because that's obviously going to be a really big series here coming up. And then I'm assuming following right after that start, he would be placed on the suspension so he can serve his time with that. We did see Abner Uribe. He got sent down to AAA to serve his suspension. That way the Brewers can get an arm up in the bullpen, because we're obviously going to need more bullpen guys here rolling into this Cubs series. I didn't actually see if there was a determination on which pitcher was called up. I'm assuming Jared Koenig, who was sent down recently, might probably be the main guy that'll get the call up in this case, but I'm sure there's some other ones that are right there that we've seen some stints with already this year that would make sense to bring him up. So, yeah, that was kind of, I guess, my rant on that. I really don't, I sit here and I tried to think about this. I don't understand how you hand out, specifically Freddie Peralta, a 5-game suspension, but only give Jose Siri a 3-game suspension. It just seems so backwards to me, and overall just frustrating as a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers, and I'm just disappointed in what this umpiring crew did throughout the series. I just think there needs to be some kind of repercussion as to their actions and making these incorrect calls, but of course, with them being protected under the the Union of Umpires Association or whatever it is, usually it seems like all they get is like a performance review and maybe some guidance as to how to interact and how to take care of things in the future. But it's like, why is this something that we couldn't have taken care of in the onset? And like I said, it almost just seems like this all rooted because Chris Guccione wanted to make him seem like the biggest person on the field, and really, honestly, in all honesty, made it seem like he had a much bigger ego for himself than I'm sure, and now what I think of him as going forward after this. So, like I said, that's kind of me just getting my piece out. That way I kind of was able to still go off of what happened yesterday. Obviously, the suspensions came out yesterday morning, and just talk about that briefly as to what my thoughts were and give my opinions on the suspensions that I just don't think were accurate in this one. So, okay, so now as we move on, I just want to give a quick little game recap here, only just the one game to cover, obviously. So Colin Rea, how about a heck of a day for him again? He advances 3-0 on the season. He goes 6 innings pitched on 4 hits, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts. I really, truly do think he has done a fantastic job in the role in our starting rotation so far this year. I think he really needs to earn some more praise from some of the fan base. I really do think he's done a great job. I mean, right now he's sitting at a 2.67 ERA, and this is a guy that we know doesn't have the most electric stuff. He doesn't throw, 90 plus miles an hour. He's not in the upper 90s. He doesn't have incredible movement on his stuff, but he's got 5 different pitches that he throws. He's got the 4-seam, sinker, cutter, sweeper, and the splitter, and all of them just play so well off of each other. He does a really nice job mixing and matching. Kind of got, he's got a really nice release point with allowing the pitches to look the same coming out of the hand. And I think he's done a really good job so far this season. We've seen him get roughed up a couple times, specifically early in games, and like I've mentioned before, he's been susceptible to the home run ball, even going back to last year, and frankly throughout his entire career, but he fixed that one up in this one. Like I said, no earned runs. So really good outing from him. I think probably his best of the season so far. So kudos to him on a great start. And really the Brewers pitching staff just took advantage of the struggling Rays offense in this entire series. They only gave up 5 runs. They gave up obviously 1 in that series loss for the Brewers in that opener, and then 2 in the last couple games. So some really good things from the pitching side of things. So I was really happy to see what the pitching was able to do in this one. And how about Willy Adames in this one? He, now after we've waited a little bit, not so much anymore, but at the time, he had hit 3 home runs in less than 48 hours. So hopefully we're seeing him kind of break out of the funk that he was in. So, this is a really good addition to the offense. I think if we're able to get him in a little bit of a consistent basis hitting, I do think throughout his career and throughout his Brewers tenure, he has tended to be a very streaky hitter. So hopefully with some of the batting changes that he's made, like I said in previous episodes, his walk rate right now and his strikeout rate are the best in his career. So we do have that to look at. His plate discipline, I think with kind of his veteran mentality, the more pitching he's seen at the MLB level, I think that would make sense why those numbers would be going up. But it's also credit to him for making these adjustments and having a better eye, not chasing pitches, and just doing a better job at putting the ball in play. And hopefully now with, not only just being able to put the ball in play more consistently, we're able to see some of his numbers, some of his power numbers kind of come through and kind of pop out through the stat sheet. So we did see that one in this series. Really good thing for him. Hit home runs in back-to-back innings in that series finale. Tallied 4 RBIs. So, yeah, I'm really hoping that we're able to have his hot streak right now carry into this Cubs series. Definitely going to be needing some offense in this series against the Cubs. They've got a pretty solid pitching staff so far this year, which is a little bit of an adjustment for them in years past. I'm sure part of this has to do with Craig Counsell. It seems like wherever Craig Counsell is, there always seems to be pretty good pitching. Seems like kind of a reputation for him in his managerial time. So yeah, I just hopefully the Brewers are able to carry that into. Willy Adames did have a couple errors in this one, but I think he made up for it completely with the offensive output that he had. And then not to oversee some of the other guys we saw towards the bottom of the lineup, specifically Oliver Dunn, Blake Perkins. They both have multi-hit games at the bottom of the order. So really good to see them come through. Bottom of the order has been, it's been a really critical spot for the Brewers this season offensively. They've done a really good job in the bottom of the order, and part of the reason why we've succeeded so much offensively, because you get guys on base, put stress on pitchers, and then we've got, the meat of our batting order coming up with guys like Contreras, Frelick, Adames, Hoskins, guys that have been pretty consistent all year so far this year. So just wanted to touch on that here and go over some of that and what happened in yesterday's game. So like I said, Brewers wrap up with another series victory. So good to see them bounce back after that series loss to the Yankees. Really did exactly what we were hoping for and wanted to see as we hope to carry this momentum into the Cubs series. So one other thing in yesterday's game that was really interesting that I wanted to touch on. So Giago Vieira gets his glove removed in the 9th inning, which basically, from what I understood, was due to the color of the glove, saying that it kind of matched too close to the color of the baseball. And this has been something that the MLB has enforced more heavily in the last couple seasons. You're not able to wear like white sleeves or a white glove or anything that matches the color of the baseball. In this case, Vieira had basically a white and kind of I guess you would call it a tan or off-white grayish type glove color, which I can understand why it was removed. It did seem like the colors somewhat matching to a baseball color. So I do understand this and think that it was a reasonable call. But what's really funny about this is, of course, out of all people, first of all, Chris Guccione is the one that comes out and picks this out. So he comes out and checks the glove, and the crew gets together and they end up removing this glove. But this is the same exact glove that Vieira pitched with in Tuesday's game in the ninth inning. So what was the difference between Tuesday's game and Wednesday's game? Unless the only thing I can think of is, maybe the Rays, either the manager or, Kevin Cash, the Rays manager, or one of the players that batted against Vieira maybe mentioned something after the game or pregame on Wednesday. I guess this would make sense to bringing it to the attention to the umpires. But I just don't understand, again, and I'm this is going to be a joke that I throw out, but I'm surprised Chris Guccione didn't decide to just eject Vieira in this case. Obviously not the proper thing to do, but based on how some of the calls have gone this series, some of the things and decisions that he's made, it wouldn't have surprised me to any amount to see him just eject Vieira for absolutely no reason. Seems like that's what's happened in this whole series. Seems like anything that can go wrong in the Brewers' fashion has gone wrong. So that's just me getting my joke out a little bit. I obviously not a clear way for anything to happen there, or a reason for anything to happen, but just kind of surprised me. And it's just like, what the heck are we doing? Why can this guy pitch with the glove in one game and then you come out and deem it as improper or against the rules, in the next game? So I'm glad that the umpiring crew, I'm glad that the series is over. I'm really glad that the Brewers were able to really, I think, fight the adversity and still squeak out a couple wins against the struggling Tampa Bay Rays right now, kind of taking advantage of that, and be able to see past some of these missed calls that the Brewers had. I think Pat Murphy did a great job with his post-game interviews. I think, I've gotten a lot more respect for Pat Murphy, not that I already did, but I really do like him as our manager, even more so after this series. I think he's treated the scenarios very professionally, basically just saying, look, I'm going to give a little bit of my insight on what happened in this game, my thoughts. He goes through everything for about 5 minutes, and then he says, you know what? We can't carry this into tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day, and we're going to come into this game with a new mentality. And that's really been his philosophy this entire season, is kind of drop what happened in the game prior, whether the Brewers played a poor game, whether whatever it was that maybe could have happened or would have happened or did happen. But he comes into the next game with a clean slate, comes into it with a new mentality. It's a new game. We'll worry about tomorrow. And I think that's a very professional way and an opportunity for a manager to have an outlook on a game, especially with what took place in these ones. So hats off to him from me for the way that he's handled all this. Sad to see him go on his 2-game suspension, but I really do think he's instilled his worth and his competitiveness into this Milwaukee Brewers team and staff for any of those people that had not seen that previously. So we will see hopefully more of that here this year, hopefully able to not be suspended at any amounts later this year, but just good to see him defending the team and really instilling his way as a manager in this ballpark. So yeah, with that, seems like a lot to cover. Seems like a lot of me just going on and on about some topics that I wish I wouldn't have to discuss. But this is just kind of a boil over, I feel like, of some of the calls that we've seen that have just been really crappy, in my opinion. I don't understand some of the umpiring crew from this series. Glad to see us move on to the next umpiring crew. Hopefully they're a lot better. Not trying to say that there's not better umpires than others, because there certainly is. and it does irritate me a little bit that these umpires are not able to get dealt with in the way that I think they should with, it's like at work or, somewhere else. If you don't do your job or you're not doing your job successfully, you're going to get a demotion, exactly in the MLB. If you're not doing your job as a ball player in the ball club, you get a demotion to AAA, AA, or whatever. You get taken out of the lineup. You don't get utilized as often. So how come we can't see the same thing with these umpires? If we're going to have umpires that are just making blatantly bad calls on a consistent basis, I feel like there should be something in some sort of fashion that takes away the time that an ump gets to see on a baseball field. It just seems like, to me, there should be some kind of repercussion as to what's taking place here. But nonetheless, just happy to move on to the next umpiring crew, and hopefully we don't see any more of this banter between games. And really, like I said, the thing that was really irking me was just the fact that these calls were coming at such crucial times and making such significant impacts to the outcome of the game. It'd be completely different if it was in an 8-0 game where it wouldn't have changed the game one way or the other, but it's just like, it just doesn't fully make a ton of sense as to why these calls are being made. And like I said, I could go on and on about this. I could have a conversation about something like this all day. So moving on from that really covers all of what I wanted to talk about today. Not too much further to dive into the in-game with just covering the one game from yesterday, but just some interesting things. And really the main point of this was discussing the suspensions and just kind of giving my insight as to what my thoughts were and reactions to those suspensions. So yeah, with that, as you guys know, BrewPod Between the Lines podcast is always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other mainstream podcast sites. So please feel free to listen to this podcast from wherever it is you may like in the future. I can always be reached on social media using @brew_pod on Twitter or by searching BrewPod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. Obviously, Brewers have a big series against the Chicago Cubs coming up, and Brewers look to maintain their top spot in the NL Central. Like I said, going to be interesting to see where we're at heading into this series after the Cubs play their game today. A loss, Brewers will be a full game ahead. With the win, we will be tied heading into this series. So some pretty big things on the line here in this series. So should make it even more competitive and make it a really fun series. So like I said, Brewers look to continue the record they have on the road, currently the best in baseball at 12-4, and hoping to keep that streak and trend going so far from what we've seen this year. So with that, we will see you guys next time. Talk to you soon. And of course, go Brewers!